Hi, this is Preetika Rao. Welcome to my podcast. And today I have with me Abhigya Anand, a child protege who had predicted the COVID-19 pandemic scenario way before it had become a global pandemic. Recently, he appeared on Russian TV and he had already predicted the current Israel Hamas terror and in the past predicted the Ukraine-Russian war way before it had started. Today, I'm really excited to know about the current situation in the world and, of course, India. Abhigya Anand, welcome on my channel. Jai Shri Krishna.
Jai Shri Krishna, Jai Shri Krishna.
I'm really excited for this interview because you actually turned viral during the pandemic, and ever since I have followed a lot of your videos. So let's talk about your recent predictions, the war predictions or the tension, the geopolitical scenario that's going on with Israel and Hamas. Firstly, let's talk about the previous Russia-Ukraine war that you had predicted. Can you tell us can you tell us the planetary positions and how you could predict this war way in advance before it materialized?
The very methodology of how Russia and Ukraine war was predicted was because there was a slow movement of Mars towards Saturn, which I kind of visualize. I like to visualize grahas in the form of a time lapse, like trying to understand how they will be, like, say, 6 months later, 1 year later, 2 years later, 10 years later, 20 years later, sometimes even 1,000 years later. So visualizing them like a time lapse is very, very effective because it allows you to understand that cosmic interplay. Now, when we just go deep into a specific time frame, I just realized that Saturn and Mars in July 2021 were opposite each other, like 180 degrees apart. So naturally, Mars would slowly move towards Saturn in terms of the zodiac. So actually speaking, in the sky, none of this is happening. Mars is not moving towards Saturn. When Mars and Saturn are getting conjunct, they are actually in the same plane of viewing from the Earth, which is why they look like they are conjunct. And which is why their rays intermingle there, which is why Varaha Mihira uses the word intermingling of rays. Jyotihi, he uses the word exactly Jyotihi. It's the rays which are important for us, not the grahas themselves. They're not actually hitting each other. They're not conjuncting and hitting each other, for those of you who are kind of a little bit confused about this aspect. So Saturn and Mars was gradually moving towards Saturn. And now what's going to happen is that Saturn is a graha which basically, its karakatva is that of a very irritable personality, just bringing it into some mundane terms, a kind of irritable personality. And Mars is an aggressive personality. So when you bring an irritable personality and an aggressive person together, what's going to happen is that there is going to be a confrontation. And Saturn is something that is also a very, Saturn also symbolizes a place where there's no growth, where there's corruption, where there is, uncertainty about the future, where things are very, very much difficult to live and the living standards are bad. So if you look at Ukraine, I think Saturn's Karakatvas match very well with Ukraine. It's been affected by the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, one of the worst in the world. And compared to other countries in Europe, it is basically not doing very well ever since it was founded and even before that. So, and Mars on the other hand side is something like Russia. So you see Mars gradually rushing towards Saturn and Saturn basically standing right there. And Mars, getting very close to Saturn around March to April of 2022. And Saturn entered Mars's nakshatra on the 18th of February 2022. That was the turning point. I addressed this in my article on August of 2021. And because some skeptics always question me as to some process which they call backdating, you cannot honestly and really, you cannot backdate any video. You cannot backdate anything of that sort. Once you make a video, all YouTubers would probably know this very well. Once you make a video, the date remains the same and you cannot change it. So even then, to assuage the concerns of some of our very dear skeptics, I published the article and archived it as well on Internet Archive. So we have that very much solidified there. So then in that article, I addressed that there would be a geopolitical shock and it would happen very much somewhere around March to April 2022. Then after a few months, I also realized that Saturn is moving into Dhanishta Nakshatra, and I made a separate video about that. That was 18th of February 2022. Now, the war began on the 24th of February 2022, which is just 6 days from the 18th of February, just 6 days away. And that was a turning point for me. I realized how important these nakshatra movements are, and Saturn's very movement into that nakshatra basically changed the whole picture of geopolitics for the coming many years. I think this is one of the most significant events, the Russia-Ukraine war. It's not like any other. We cannot draw any direct parallel to it, actually, in terms of the devastation it's caused in the recent years, the impact it has had on different countries, and the profits that have surged in those who are trying to profit out of the war. So since Dhanishta is the star of weaponry, and Saturn cruising through Dhanishta Nakshatra gave a massive boost in the revenues of all countries which depend on wars in order to prosper. So sadly, our world is still run like that. The more the wars, the more the prosperity for a few, and the harm and violence, pain and suffering for many. So that is something that is very clear, and that's how I predicted this. But Saturn also gets into Dhanishta Nakshatra quite regularly. I mean, once in 30 years. And Mars also does come with Saturn every 2 years. So why is this special? We are living in very special times. It is nothing like what has been experienced in the last 800 years, something very different this time. Because this time, in 2020, Varamira clearly says, Sammoha Kosho Bhayadau Prajanam in his Brihat Samhita. I would recommend the viewers to please read the Brihat Samhita. It's a celebrated work on mundane astrology. It's a compendium of even ancient works. Even Varamira himself says that this is not his own imagination. It's a compendium of something that has already been given down from the past. So just imagine how antique our scriptures are. So there it's written, Sammoha Kosho Bhayadau Prajana. When Saturn and Jupiter come really close to each other, there are numerous fears that come into picture. And depending on the closeness of the conjunction, this is further intensified. So the conjunction that we had in 2020, known as the Great Conjunction, was the closest since around the 1200s, when Genghis Khan was going on a rampage around the world. So that was the thing. So Genghis Khan of 1200s was Corona of 2020. Genghis Khan was rushing from Mongolia throughout the whole of Asia, massacring people, destroying a lot of countries, basically lighting fire to everything. People were in a kind of lockdown out of the fear of Genghis Khan at that particular time. The Mongols were ravaging the whole world, except for Bharat, by God's grace. But that's how I drew a literal parallel to 2020 and looked at the subsequent events after 1200 and saw how it compares with the subsequent events after 2020. The whole world was changed. Many empires in India collapsed. The whole world order basically changed in 1200s. They again changed in the 1600s. If you see the cycle, it's a 400-year cycle. And a new 400-year cycle began in 2020. So the very conjunctions that are happening here are not just to be viewed independently, but they are to be viewed in relation to what has happened 3 years back, which is the Great Conjunction. So when you look at everything independently, we make a mistake. In astrology, it's like viewing a massive painting, an ant on the ground, on the floor, viewing a massive painting from wherever the ant is located. It is so confusing. You have to zoom out. It's very difficult. You have to zoom out. You have to walk behind and see the whole picture. And the whole picture is so mesmerizing. However bad or good it may be, the reactions, it is so mesmerizing, and it was very clear that something is going to happen. And what is going to be affected? Food. The first thing which is going to be affected out of this whole situation is food. We in India are not so affected by this, so we generally kept in the dark about what's happening in the rest of the world. But many countries depend on these two behemoths of grain production for their daily food. Their daily bread depends, because Russia and Ukraine together produce a large percentage of the world's grains. And it has affected many poor countries around the world and pushed many more people into hunger and poverty. And that was the very first thing. And how did astrology predict that there would be a food-related crisis as well? That was because Saturn and Mars, whenever they entered the position, which is an earthy sign, Makara Rashi is an earthy sign, it is a Prithvi Tattva sign. So whatever grows on the ground is a produce of the earth. That will be targeted when Saturn and Mars come together. Automatically, that was targeted. Even now, it's hanging on tenterhooks. Russia and Ukraine anytime can tell the world they're not going to be supplying grains, and it's still in a very risky situation. Many countries, their whole day is spent trying to analyze how to secure their food. We are safe by God's grace, but several other countries are suffering. So that was the method by which I actually got to know. But at that time, I did not try to go deeper into the location as to where it was, but I was very determined to, get to the truth of that. Where exactly the war would happen is not something I made very clear in the initial days. I just said there would be a massive geopolitical shock combined with a major crash in the stock markets, as well as a major food crisis, and it would be a great confrontation which would affect the whole world. Naturally, it was Russia, Ukraine, because those were the only two countries which were facing off at that time. But still, I did not mention the location. But I was bent upon trying to understand the location, the science of understanding the location of a specific situation. And by God's grace, Bhagavan Shri Krishna allowed me to understand that as well this time, at least to an extent. And I used that to predict the present situation between Israel and Hamas. So initially, when I started off predicting, I wasn't able to exactly distinguish between what exactly would that major danger be. When I predicted there would be a severe danger in 2020, I got most of the predictions out of intuition, sheer intuition, as well as analyzing the positions. It was a combination of the two. But I was not able to exactly pinpoint exactly where and how much or which place would be worst affected, which place would be least affected, though I gave some indications like China on one side. And I was not also able to say exactly whether it would be only a disease or only a war. It would be something very bad, that was for sure. And of course, at that time, there was no other person talking about this very big danger. So further, that put me in some time of doubt for some time. Like there's no one else talking about this. It's only me talking about a big danger in the world in the coming 6 months. So when I posted the video, people were like, come on, don't tell us there's a big danger. There's nothing going to happen like that. The world is fine. Everything is going well. Everyone is going to grow. The World Economic Forum also said that, there's going to be a massive growth in the economy next year. And, the world economy was like rushing really fast. Everything was good. From where would this showstopper come? So people were like very confused. But I was very confident there would be a major danger because my intuition told me that there would be a severe danger. So I titled the video like that and put it. But over the years, I have tried to get sharper in terms of the location as well. And this recent prediction was part of that effort.
So you also appeared on Russian TV and you predicted about the Russia-Ukraine war. Did you predict it much way in ahead on the Russian TV?
They actually contacted me. Yes, they actually contacted me in 2021. It was Russian state media contacted me. They did not tell me anything about the interview or anything as such. They just invited me to Moscow. And I was apprehensive about traveling to Moscow. So I just told them, I'll just, tell you my predictions over video call or just send you an email. And I just sent them an email as well. But they did not have an interview with me before the Russia-Ukraine war. They had an interview only after the Russia-Ukraine war. And they had several times called me to Moscow. So then I've always done only video interviews with them. And the only interview I've done is after the Russia-Ukraine war, not before it.
What is your prediction for the Russia-Ukraine war? Is it going to cease very soon, or is it going to go even worse?
Temporarily, it will cease. My previous prediction was that starting November 2023, there will be a gradual reduction in the war. In the intensity of the war, there will be a gradual reduction. That was my prediction about, that's just a month away.
And let's talk about Israel Hamas, which is right now, very, very disturbing for the entire world, to just be a spectator to. What are your predictions? Like, do you think it'll escalate, or what is your prediction in general for this scenario?
Of course, the Russia-Ukraine war, part of it is going to reduce gradually because it's all about the attention game. As far as I have observed, countries are looking for more attention as to who is firing the biggest firearms and who is getting which weapon and what's happening in terms of the firearms. There are a lot of people, disturbingly, who are fascinated by the whole concept of firearms in these wars, not looking at what's happening on the ground. Of course, there are many people who are very compassionate, but there are many people who are looking at just the fireworks happening. So, actually speaking, when one country is at war with another and another one comes up suddenly, and then sympathy moves from one place to another place, and gradually the Russia-Ukraine war is going to go down. And I'll also talk about it later as to what exactly I believe is going to happen about it in the future, and where Ukraine is heading and where Russia is heading. But talking about the Israel-Hamas situation, it is very deeply saddening to see what's happening there. But it was totally expected, actually speaking, because as I mentioned in my video on the 4th of October, this would be very similar to 9/11. So what happened in 9/11 is that some foolish and absolutely inhumane terrorists just flew a plane into the two buildings, carrying a damn about whoever is going to die there. And many thousands of people died. And after this, US responded by getting full-fledged into the Middle East and basically setting up massive bases there and destroying countless more lives. We don't even know the number because after all, it's the US, and when the US does something, we rarely get the numbers. So it would be probably in the tens of thousands or even in the hundreds of thousands, probably. We never know. So that is what entailed, and this is exactly what's happening now. What is happening now is that first, these inhumane terrorists from Hamas just went in and killed thousands of people. And following that, the same thing, the very same scenario was expected because it was the same astrological position that preceded both. And hence, I wanted to tell people that it's the very same thing that's going to happen. That time it was in Gemini axis. This time the same thing is in Aries axis, which is why the locations, etc., are very much different. But the position is the same. The aftermath is going to be very much the same. Israel and other forces in the region will launch a massive campaign against the terrorists, in which process they will cause the death of thousands of people, including innocent people and terrorists all together. So the same trajectory, if you look at the history of what happened after these 9/11 attacks, it's going to be very similar to that. A lot of people are going to die, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is a very long war. People who think that Israel is very, very powerful and it's going to make short work of these people, I don't think so. I believe that it's going to take a really, really long time, and this is going to go a really long way overall in shaping global politics. This is just a precursor to what is going to happen in the coming few years after 2029-32. And Hamas, as such, is not going to get over very soon. This is not meant to support them in any way. Absolutely abhorring people, I would say. But I wouldn't even call them humans. But astrologically, they're not so easy to deal with. And it's only the civilians mainly who are dying. A lot of Hamas officials are also getting killed in this process. Terrorists are getting killed. But it's not done. The story is not over. Lots more is expected to happen in the coming few months. This war is easily going to drag on for a year and a half or even 2 years.
You have also predicted some tension in the Middle Eastern region. Is that true?
Yes. On October 4th, I focused mainly on the Middle Eastern region. So it's not the eastern part of the Middle East that is mostly affected. It's the western part, which of course includes Israel and those specific areas. I mentioned in the danger zone, basically, which I used a little red marker to circle it around. So yeah, the Middle East is going to be severely affected during this time frame. And this is just an event that is going to snowball into something bigger later on in the future. As we see global conflicts, when we are nearing something like a world war or a global conflict, there are many events that slowly come together, snowball, and finally result in that major explosion. So we are actually undergoing that now. The whole world is going through that. Polarization, different kinds of nationalisms, different kinds of ideologies and multilateral power. So it's no more like we have one big superpower and that's going to dictate the whole world. We have many powers. So when we get many powers, there's going to be a conflict. So we are in the process of that conflict coming up, and the Middle East is just one of the battlefields where this is going to take place.
Also, I saw a video of yours where you were saying that there could be an anti-foreign element targeting India somewhere around April 2024. Is that right?
Yes, before April 2024, around that time frame, because for Bharat's horoscope, the Rahu time frame is coming up during that period. Rahu is, of course, a foreigner, a Mlecha. Mlechas are those in the northwest from our country, and far northwest from our country, would say people of Arabian descent. So especially those who are barbaric. Not the ordinary people from that place, but those who are barbaric from that place are known as Mlechas. Those who go around with, who have since ages gone around with spears and swords, and today are going around with bombs. So those kind of people are going to be a threat to our country around April of 2024. So this is a statement I actually made early on this year, because most of the panchangas I have seen in our country were basically saying that Mercury is Lord of this year, which I strongly disagree with. A lot of videos I've seen online, a lot of predictions were all based on Mercury being Lord of this year. Whereas I disagree with that. I believe it is Mars which has been the lord of this year, because just because the Yugadi was celebrated the next day morning doesn't mean it happened on that particular day. It happened in the midnight, but no one celebrates Yugadi in the midnight. So they did the major celebrations the next day in the morning. Hence, the lunar new year has begun on a Tuesday and not on a Wednesday, and hence the lord of this year is Mars. It is not Buddha. It is Kuja, not Buddha. And based on that, I use this verse from the Brihad Samita. Vato dhatascharati vanhirati prachando graman vanani nagarani cha sannidhattuhu, and haheti dasyuguna vata hata ratanti nisvikrita nupashavo bhuvis matya sanghaha. This verse clearly states that if Mars is the lord of the year, which means to say if Mars has the strongest influence on the year, people will run in fear, saying ha ha, and they will be screaming, and they will be trying to protect their children. It gives such a picturized visualization of what happened on the 7th of October in Israel. Dasyu gana pata hata ratanti. Dasyus are thieves and terrorists, and they were there since a very long time in ancient Bharat. Even the Vedas mention Dasyus. Dasyus means robbers who use weapons and terror in order to steal land, women and children and wealth from people. They are called Dasyus. Dasyugara Pata Hata, which means those who are killed by terrorists, Ratanti. They will be screaming. People will be screaming in extreme terror and fear. So that's the picture it gives. And then rains will be either excessive in some places, not so much in others. We have seen that trend this year, based on which I predicted that July to August would be having major floods around the world. And some other places would experience literally no rain and difficulties to farmers. So those kind of things have also happened. And grama, vanani, nagarani, sanni dhattu. So yeah, there would be major vanhirati prachando. There would be major fires during this year. That is April to April. So I believe it's not done in Israel. It's coming to Bharat as well. So this was predicted long before the Israel conflict, but now I would like to solidify that further and say that yes, it is coming to Bharat, and Bharatiyas have to be very careful. And long before this happened, I also suggested that the Indian government should tighten security in the south as well, not only in the north. They tend to focus only on Delhi and Mumbai most of the time. Whereas there are many other economic centers in our country apart from just Delhi and Mumbai. We have Tamil Nadu, we have Karnataka, we have parts of Kerala as well. Especially in Tamil Nadu, you have very big economy as well, and it's very important to be careful over there. And Mars was in Gemini when the year began, and Gemini is directs the southeastern and northwestern direction simultaneously. Mars was right there. So I expect terrorist attacks both in the northwest of our country as well as southeast of our country. The northwest of which is already done. Northwest in the sense not inside our country, just a few, what do you say? It happened in Mian Valley recently in Pakistan. The jihadis blew up a few planes there in the army base. And now it will happen in the southeast, because astrology not only talks about political boundaries but also geographical boundaries. So Mian Valley in Pakistan is actually northwest of Bharat only. It is nothing very much far away from us. And then on the other hand side, in the southeast, we have to be really careful. So Bharat must be on high alert, especially places where people gather for fun and where there are peaceful congregations, where there are fun-related congregations, sports. People have to be really careful in those specific areas, because it's Mithuna Rashi, and Mithuna Rashi is all about music, sports, and public areas where people talk and speak and congregate, basically.
So you are predicting that there could be some kind of a terror attack in these places.
One has to be really careful. So earlier in my video that I made that day on the 4th of October, I showed two danger zones in the video. One was the Middle Eastern part and the other, including Israel and Palestine region. And the other part was Bharat and Bharat southeast portion as well as the northwest portion. I basically showed these two regions. So since the massive attack and massive destruction has already happened in Israel, the intensity of the attacks in India are likely to be lesser, because most of the negative energy is already spent out there. I don't think there is enough left in order to cause catastrophic damage to our country. But the overall rise in terrorism and at least one or two major incidents are possible. And this is very clear. Whenever these planetary positions come in, it has happened in the past. I've seen it. 1993. First, the World Trade Center was bombed. Within a few months here in Mumbai, there were bombings. The first entry of terrorism in the United States was 1993, when an underground bomb was placed under the World Trade Center, which blew up a few floors. And that coincided with Saturn moving through Dhanishta and going into Shatabhishak. Similarly, now the same thing is happening. Saturn moved through Dhanishta and now is in Shatabhishak. So we expect a similar thing to happen in our country as well. So we need to be really careful.
I really hope and pray that we have some rise in consciousness entirely as humanity, and we hold peace above religion and peace above whatever concepts we have of God. Nothing can, I think, compensate peace. You guys can follow Abhigya on his channel, and also he's a great astrologer. If you want consultations, then I think, Abhigya, do you have a website? How can they reach out to you?
So if anybody needs a consultation, the best thing, first of all, I divide into two categories in this particular situation. If you have a very urgent problem, say some of your family members or you are experiencing something very serious, I am very much happy. I would love to help you instantly. I would try my best to reach out to you. You can reach out to me via my website. There's a separate form for that, and I do not require any dakshina for the purpose. Whereas astrologers are supposed to take dakshina for every other purpose. Like, for example, if someone wants to know when they are going to get prosperous and when they are going to succeed in life and things like that, then just like a doctor or any other kind of consultant, an astrologer is entitled and supposed to take a fee. So for them, we have a separate link for a proper consultation. So one can follow that link as well.
Wow. Really nice to know that. And if you have any questions for Abhigya, please put it down. He's going to read it. I'm going to read it too. You can subscribe to my channel. On that note, thank you, Abhigya, for being a part of my channel today. And Jai Shri Krishna.